My name is Darren Hupke, and this is Pixels and Polygons. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Thanks for coming back another week. This week is a special week as it is the 50th episode, but also doing a little bit further math. I think I only missed 2 weeks where I just outright didn't post an episode just from delays and mistakes and whatever may happen. So it's been 52 weeks since the first episode. So that's a full calendar year. So that means it's been a year. It's the year anniversary episode. Thanks for sticking around if you've been listening to that entire time. If you're new and joining recently, you can catch back up on all those old episodes. It's all free and all available to everybody. But yeah, it's been really fun to do this, and it's cool to be here at this year mark. And I'm curious to see how far I'll do this. I was just chatting with a guest on a future episode today, and we were talking about just kind of doing the show and kind of sticking to it. And I just said the same thing to him that I'll say now, but I'll basically continue to do this as long as it's fun, and it's not super difficult to put together. So as long as it's as long as I still have like some fun questions to ask and some fun guests to answer, should be able to keep continuing to do it, talking about video games and having a good time. This episode won't be the same familiar format. I had a opportunity. Got called out online by past guest Luis. He called us out online, me and Aidan, to have a little throwdown RPG gauntlet, dialogue, conversation, argument, whatever. So we started chatting about that, and we put that together, and that's what this episode is. It's the three of us sitting down and chatting about some of our favorite RPGs. We decided to take a little bit of a fantasy draft format to it, and we all agreed upon a master list of games before we recorded the episode, but we all pick one after another, an RPG for our list, and we compiled together, our top 5 out of those, and just had conversation. It was just an excuse to make a fun format to have a conversation about just the RPG genre and the history of it and some of the landmark titles from it and the ones that mean a lot to us. So this is not a 20 to 30 minute episode. This is an hour plus big conversation. So just for fun, just to have a kind of a different way to celebrate 1 year and have a different format of an episode. So hopefully y'all enjoy it. We had a great time talking about it, and we have got plenty of games left on our list that we can even come back around again for a second serving of draft rounds and everything. So let's see if that happens in the future. If you like it, shoot us a message on Blue Sky and let us know what you thought. And I'll also have a list of all of our games that we selected on Blue Sky. So we'll do a little poll. You can vote with your likes or comments on which one of our games lists you thought was maybe the best list of them all. Winner will get just Blue Sky kudos and social media kudos. I don't know. We'll kind of play around with it and have some fun. But yeah, that's the episode. That's the format. Just having some fun. So I hope you are ready for a big, long episode and a long conversation. If you're not a fan of RPGs, just stop now and come back again next week, because that is exclusively what we chat about. We chat about a bunch of them, but that is exclusively what we're going to be talking about this week. Otherwise, same business as usual. Pixelsandpolygons.net. You can buy the books, all my 32-bit library books and retro game zine. Patreon.com/Darren Hupke. You can follow along with some original writing I post occasionally for free. There is a paid tier where you can get my postcard of the month, a single postcard review of a random game each month. It's just kind of fun to do for supporting me. And on the shop, there's all the digital copies, so you can get digital copies of 32-bit library books as well as the digital copies of the retro game zine for pretty cheap on the Patreon shop. That lets me sell digital files. So, same old. I am still working on some other things in the background, and let's go moving along nicely. The next 3 volumes or 3 issues of retro game zine are currently being put together as well too. So I'll have some more info on those in the future. I did announce the games I'm covering. That'll be an issue on Breath of Fire 4 with Aidan also contributing to that. So guest of the episode you're listening to here will also be doing a written contribution there. Going to do a Final Fantasy Mystic Quest issue and then a Blue Stinger issue. So all of them have some cool contributors to kind of help fill out and tell some stories and talk about the love of those games and everything. So continuing that project there as I work on the big books all in the background. Otherwise, that's it. I'm going to not try and bore you with too much stuff out here up front. That's everything you need to know to enjoy, and we will be back again next week with another new standard episode and start of year 2 of Pixels and Polygons. Thanks. Bye. But welcome everyone to the, I'm calling this the 1-year anniversary episode, Bonanza Spectacular, event. I don't think I have any other words I can use to describe that. I'm not a writer, I guess. Even though I might try and claim to be. But this is the super 1-year anniversary. It just kind of, stars kind of aligned. Actually, one of the guests on this show, I've got both Aidan and Luis back on the show, but Luis kind of shouted it out on Blue Sky, threw down a gauntlet to challenge us to battle it out and have us pick our most definitive RPGs of all time, and kind of just hash it out and talk about it, yell at each other, throw some tables virtually and whatnot. So those are the 2 guests I've got on the show. So welcome to you both, Aidan and Luis. Thanks for being back in the show.
Oh, thanks for having me back. This is awesome.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah. What made you inspired to want to throw down this RPG gauntlet then, Luis?
You know, everybody plays these games. I mean, Aidan literally wrote the book on it, so it's which shout outs to him for that. It's probably, I mean, it's the introduction, right? I mean, there's a few other books that have come out. One which I actually reviewed recently, but they're fairly technical, right? Very academic. I think if you're gonna read one, it's gonna be Aidan's book, and then you can go out and try to, read other stuff.
Yeah, should just be a giant plug then, an hour-long plug for Aidan's book. Fight Magic Items. You can pick it up on the internet and have it shipped and delivered directly to your house from many sources, likely. Find it even in bookstores. I mean, I guess between all 3 of us, we've probably written hundreds of thousands of words on RPGs. So if 3 people were going to sit down, at least, we're some of those folks being able to have that conversation. So I like that we get to do this and have some fun here. I typically start things with like a little, icebreaker and things like that. I don't know if you guys all want to maybe share your favorite magic or skill from a role-playing game. Your top tier. What is your favorite magic or skill from a character in an RPG?
I'm going to go to a heavy hitter, one that's probably going to go really early today. I've always been a fan of Marl and Chrono's dual attack from Chrono Trigger, Aura Whirl. It's just like an early game, area of effect heal spell, but it's super versatile, and it also was such a strong example of how that game showcased the way dual attacks, combined attacks work, that like Chrono wasn't always just a damage dealer. Sometimes it was worth giving up his turn to heal your team, and I thought that was always really interesting.
That's a cool choice.
That's a really good choice. Yeah, I have one. I mean, I'll kind of cheat a little bit. Sometimes it's a move, sometimes it's not. It's Puff Puff in Dragon Quest. So, everybody's looking for Puff Puff.
That's fun. I'm a fan of Mug. So I like to take the loss in damage done and use like steal a lot, like the thief characters. Like I do enjoy. I feel like oftentimes when those mechanics are in games, like you're rewarded either with like an early grab at like something maybe that you couldn't get that time, or maybe you save a bunch of like in-game money because you're able to acquire it that way. So once you get like the ability to mug, like in some a lot of RPGs, being able to do damage and not miss out because you invested early on and potentially growing that skill. I've always just liked that ability and everything. So I think that would be mine. I think for sure, as far as this question goes, is maybe a favorite magic or skill in a game. But cool. Let's do a quick this or that too. Let's say 2D or 3D. Just outright generalized 2D or 3D. Pick one.
2D. I think we've gone astray with 3D. 3D has led us to dark times. 2D is. I mean, we as human beings, we only can think in 2 dimensions. We can live in 3 dimensions, but we can only think in 2 dimensions. So yeah, I think that it's too complex. How many people do you know that stopped playing games when it went to 3D? So.
And it is valid to think about it that way. I mean, when it does get complicated, it loses like ease of access or the ability for somebody to potentially participate, and then there's more barriers to remove potentially people from enjoying something, that makes sense. But I mean, I like the idea of the 2D, 3D hybrid, these like the Octopath Travelers of the world, where you take that 2D nostalgia and like that aesthetic of it all, that is the wonderful choice, but then you throw it in the 3D space. Like, that's all I want these days. Like, give me that and that alone, remake Chrono Trigger in that formula, new games like another Octopath game or something like that, like that's the only thing I want in the world right now is to continue that trend.
Well, you didn't hear it from me, but I think that's in the works. So, yeah.
It's better be. What about you?
I think
2D or 3D?
Yeah, I mean, the hybrid approach is interesting. I think for me, it's the opposite direction. Like, I think the pinnacle, especially when we're talking about RPGs, was the kind of the hand-created 2D pre-rendered backdrops and that we got on like PlayStation and PlayStation 2. There was just a level of detail and uniqueness to like every scene. Like there were no repeated tile sprites. There were no repeated environmental objects because every scene was hand-created by an artist down to the last detail. And so you had these worlds that felt rich and unique, and every step along the way felt like a new place, rather than kind of recycled assets. And I think that just really threaded the needle of being able to create worlds that were, that felt like their own world, rather than something that was maybe assembled from parts.
That's a good perspective too, actually. Yeah, another angle to think on this forced mandatory 2D or 3D choice-based question. How about one more? Turn-based or real-time?
I'm turn-based all the way. Like I enjoy real-time stuff, like just fine. And I really like the way that Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth sort of combine real-time and turn-based. But if it comes down to it, I'll almost always gravitate towards turn-based combat, just because it clicks with my brain a little bit better. I feel like the slower, more decision-based approach to combat unfolds as a puzzle in a more sort of satisfying way in my brain as I play.
What about you, Louise?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I don't know about both of y'all, but I'm getting old. The reactions aren't as good. The reflexes aren't there. And sometimes that leads to not necessarily that I don't enjoy real time, but especially stuff that's like turn based. I'm talking about strictly turn, not active time. I hate active time. Just regular turn based. It gives you this like ease of play, and especially like just like going back to specific games too. It's great. I mean, I don't think that we've seen a better battle system than Final Fantasy X's one. I mean, and that's been my gosh, getting old now, almost 25 years. So,
Jeez. Oh
and
my gosh.
and that's a turn-based game, and I can play that system forever.
I did enjoy that. I think being able to swap in and swap out your party members and not necessarily being tied to like a 3 or 4 person rotation and that's it. I thought that was just kind of fun to always like mix and match. I think you're able to you were able to play against like weaknesses and strengths that characters had and not be like punished for not knowing in advance the unknown monster you were going to potentially fight around that corner. So I did like that. I do like a good turn-based battle system. Myself, I don't think I can be blasphemous and say real-time over turn-based, but I do enjoy like these attempts at modern touches to like pause the action while you maybe select something and give you this like feeling of like, oh, hey, maybe I am. But at the end of the day, like you're still kind of just building up like a stagger gauge by mashing, attack or something like that, just to give yourself a little like, giant swing window. But okay. Well, we've all assembled just to kind of chat about RPGs. All three of us have a love of the genre and clearly are just invested thoroughly in like the history of it, where it's been, where it's going, and just like all the feels and nostalgia all wrapped up in the history of it. So we each independently compiled a list of way more games than we needed to that we deemed, potential candidates for games we would select or choose or want to kind of pick as far as like this bonus episode's going to be. And we compiled all of that into one master list. And so we have that master list. I think we all have it in front of us at least, right? We should be able to reference it. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. We compiled that list, and we're going to kind of take turns drafting games into our own respective independent lists. And at the end of that, we'll have something that kind of represents, hopefully, to the best of our abilities, like, our list. Some of our favorites may be taken off the board, but in general, like this top 5 we'll kind of craft here should hopefully kind of represent just who we are and what we enjoy out of the genre. And along the way, it's just an excuse for all of us to kind of chat about, why these games are kind of heavy hitters, what we loved about them, and just spend some extra time just kind of diving into some of these things and talking about why we love them. But do y'all have anything you want to share before we get into it? Any touchstones or any like significant nostalgic moments you have in the genre that kind of like set you on this path, you think? Anything you want to share before we dive into it?
I wrote a whole book about how I kind of fell into console RPGs, but the gist of it, was finding that right one at the right time in my life. When I first discovered like Japanese RPGs or console RPGs, it was like on the Game Boy with Final Fantasy Legend 2, which was weird, and I didn't get it, and I just didn't want to play it. And it wasn't until a few years later when an older friend of the family, a babysitter, came over for the night with a cartridge copy of Final Fantasy 3, Final Fantasy 6. And was like, hey, we're going to play this after your little brothers are in bed. And we did, and it was like, it just blew my mind. It was like a book I could read. And after that point forward, I just couldn't, leave the genre alone. And it became just, something I was obsessed with and continue to be, obsessed with.
Right on. What about you, Luis? What brought you to the genre? Like, what were some maybe some memories or thoughts up front before we jump into the main event?
Yeah, I mean, just piggybacking off you using the word event, right? He's definitely felt like the event when it came to games. Even earlier on. I mean, late '80s, early '90s, like stuff coming from Square. Enix, even Sega with stuff like Phantasy Star, and it's yeah. I mean, I still remember most of the games I remember most vividly are these, RPGs. Not only because we spend so much time with them because those games sometimes can be like so long, but they tend to take a lot more chances when it comes to storytelling, and they also just demand more of the player, especially the old school ones, right? So much is up to like our imagination in regards to like gameplay, and the worlds are created there, but you have to do a lot of like disbelief sometimes. But when you get into them, I mean, Aiden just said like Final Fantasy 3, Final Fantasy 6. I mean, that's a game that has so many memorable moments, like the opera scene. I still quote Ultros all the time. It's my sixth favorite character of all time. That naughty octopus. So it's a lot of it's great. I mean, I learned English playing the genre, so it's I have a lot of respect for it as a form.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it was always like teased for me. I early on I had an uncle who had it was an SNES Final Fantasy. I swear I would have remembered if it was 6. Like when I saw it again, I feel like I would have remembered it was exactly that. So maybe it wasn't that. Maybe it could have been 2, I guess. Theoretically, but either way, he had it, and he never let my brother and I play it. He just thought like, "Oh no, you guys wouldn't get this. Like, this is too complex for you. Don't play this." And I always just like, I was just curious. I was like, "No, what is it? Like, I want to figure this out. Like, let me play this more." And so we try and sneak like 20 minutes a pop, here and there when he was like out of the room and things like that, just trying to boot it up and see what was going on. Never got to play much of it beyond that. A few visits and seen it there, and it was gone next time we came to visit. And then we ended up getting a copy of a Phantasy Star 2 on the Genesis, and my brother and I both were like super excited to finally have like our own RPG. We started it up. Some friend at school of my brother's really wanted to play it really badly, and he was like, "Hey, I'll give you $20 if you just let me borrow your copy," And we were like, just only had it for that first weekend, and my brother was like, "Yo, Darren, this is $20, dude. I'm gonna give it to him." And I didn't want the $20. I didn't want that at all. And he ended up loaning him the game, and we never got it back. And so I never got to ever like continue on that experience and everything. And so the genre just continued to like elude me. And then finally, Final Fantasy VII was like the big one that came out for me. Like I picked the PlayStation. I saved up my money. Like I was selecting the games. Like by that time, my brother was growing a little bit out of games and everything. And so like that was all me. And like being able to kind of experience that start to finish, having that be like my first one that I can kind of roll credits on and dive into. Like, of course I have, like so much bias and nostalgia kind of attached and weighted to that one game alone, but it opened the door for what I already was curious about as far as like the genre goes. And then that PlayStation generation essentially like sealed the deal for me about like the types of games I wanted to play growing up and kind of continuing from there into adulthood. So, yes, the great RPG conversation. Let's just jump into it then. Let's get to the main event. We've got I want to make sure we have enough time to chat and pick and have some fun here. I'm gonna defer and allow Luis to have the first pick because he's the one who shouted and tagged us and wanted to start this. So we'll go Luis, Aidan, and then I'll secede to the third pick for because I'm the host. We won't do the serpentine draft style either. And I'm not doing this to secretly get picks 3 and 4 or anything. We'll just go 1, 2, 3 like that and repeat for drafting our own list. But once you pick it, Luis, tell us a little bit about the game and why you're selecting that. And then, of course, if Aidan, if you or me have anything we want to add on to that title, let's just chat about it. Have some fun.
All right. Yeah, I'm just gonna start off by saying I'm gonna cheat a little bit on this one just because this game isn't readily available, but there's one on the list that essentially does something similar. So I'm gonna have just 2 as 1. So it's gonna be Magic the Gathering, a Chandelar, the Microprose game. Everybody knows like Magic the Gathering as tabletop form, but then also, people can't and shouldn't forget how important it is to not just games for all, but video games as well. I mean, a lot of RPGs have been inspired by the deck building aspect of the game. Even battles themselves. I mean, the structure of battles, the tactical elements of Magic are definitely something you see everywhere. This game is an odd mix of real time plus turn-based real time when you're out in the main world on your quest to try to defeat Arsicon, and turn-based when you're actually battling. So if anybody's played any games like the Yu-Gi-Oh games on the Game Boy Advance, for example, and the other pick that I'm sharing this slot with, which is the Pokemon trading card game, which came out, I think it was actually 1 year later, because Endearing came out in 97, and I think Pokemon trading card game came out in 98 for the Game Boy Color too, which had a similar aspect. It doesn't have that real time like RTS element that Microprose, which people might know for Civilization, like other games and stuff. It does that very well. I mean, obviously, the level of complexities between the games, one might think that they're Magic has so many cards, so many more things. But in its exception, this early on into Magic's history, Pokemon wasn't that far off. It was still a lot simpler. That's a game, though, the Pokemon trading card game you can play on the Nintendo online service. So it's readily available. Channeler, you have to try to get like abandonware, and hopefully your new computers can run like old system. But it's a hell of a lot of fun. If anybody knows me, they know one thing about me is that I'm a degenerate card slinger. So it's any time I can play any game like this, I'm down.
I saw you recently post something about Magic, Aidan. So it seems like you maybe have an interest in Magic yourself.
Yeah, I've been playing Magic since forever, since Ice Age, like 1994, 95, or whenever that came out. So it's been a big part of my life, as long as any of the games on this list are as well. And I think Chandelar was really interesting because it showed that Magic had sort of exactly what you're describing. Like, it's a system that presented so many opportunities to build something like an RPG around, and Chandelar showed how like Magic's game system could be implemented in some like larger experience, which I think is cool. And now, we're coming full circle because Magic has a Final Fantasy set coming out in a couple of months. And so, that cyclical nature of things like Magic influencing RPGs and then kind of having that come back full circle to have its own like RPG set is pretty fun.
Yeah, I until you sent me that list, I've completely forgotten about this game existing. But I did play it and actually had experience with it when I was younger. So it was just like a flashback to like a really awesome time. My brother as well got into Magic pretty heavy when he was younger, and because we lived out in the middle of nowhere, I was obligated to learn how to play, so he had somebody to play with. And my first starter set was an Ice Age starter set as well. That's when I first joined the game. And then from there we started doing on the weekends, on Saturday, they do this thing called Arena at this card shop at the mall where we'd go and play, and we'd have our DCI numbers and, build up this ranking worldwide, but never, ever really did anything. I mean, we were fun, just having fun with it and everything, but we were playing against some pretty competitive dudes. But yeah, I totally spaced on this game, and like now I just want to go look at some at least some videos of the gameplay of it, maybe even attempt to reacquire it again, like you're suggesting there, Louise. I want to see if it's possible for me, but I do remember really enjoying this game, but like mixing my love of video games and then having like Magic the Gathering be like a core component of that was just kind of a rad combination that you don't get a lot. Duels of the Planeswalker in the 360 era, and now you have Arena, the rebranded Arena for playing online with folks, but Magic is a heavy hitter for sure. So great pick there. Aidan, do you want to get your first pick off the board then?
Oh, yeah. And I'm going to go right to the top of my list. An obvious pick for anybody who kind of follows me online or knows me. In real life, it's got to be Chrono Trigger, which is it's not just the RPG for me, it's the game for me. I mentioned earlier that Final Fantasy VI sort of introduced me and it sort of germinated my love for RPGs, console RPGs, at a time when I was really into like platformers, action platformers, Doom. I was playing a lot of Doom. Final Fantasy VI came along and showed me, there's this whole new way to experience story in video games. And then after I finished Final Fantasy VI, I was obsessed, and I went, I need whatever comes next. Whatever the creators of Final Fantasy are doing next, I need it. And that was Chrono Trigger. I pored over magazines for months, reading previews, reviews eventually, and then I couldn't even get the game right when it came out in September. I had to wait until about December. I finally got my hands on it, and it's been a love affair ever since. I think it's such a unique coming together of so many, forces, creative forces, market forces, as the creators of Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy joined together to create something that, by all rights should not work. Like, it never works when you get super groups together, especially when people like Hironobu Sakaguchi were known to be hard to work for. He had a big ego. He had very strong ideas of how to do things. And yet they all came together and they made this amazing game that kind of brings to life the best parts of Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, while also just totally being its own thing. And it remains just a really highly polished experience that I think is enjoyable as a first entry into RPGs. Whether you've been around video games for a long time, whether you're new to video games, it just feels like a joy to play. It's snappy. It never has a dull moment. Character progression is really like finely tuned, so you always feel like you're just strong enough to get past what you need to, but you also know that whatever comes along with the next level up is going to get you over that next hump. So you have that sort of compulsive need to just continue forward through the game that so few RPGs manage to really nail down. And so I think it's just a really special game, and it's my number one pick, Chrono Trigger.
Numero uno. Yeah, I like you mentioned it there, but this game does have like that my first RPG like entry level like approachability, but it also is just so rewarding for people who love like the genre entirely. I mean, there's just like no previous or prior history. You need to like, even if you don't need to know it in Final Fantasy, if you play a game that has a number in the title, you've got to think like, wait, what happened before? Do I need to know that? Or should I iterate and see what was happening with all those things? Like, this was just it in itself, like its own release in its own existence. And the way that it kind of like was able to ease players in with like that segmented story through like the time travel of it all, like it opened up, of course, like as you got to play through it and everything. And it was one of my first or I'm sorry, not mine, but it was one of my wife's first like RPGs. And so I ended up not playing it, and I deferred and like watched her play through it a lot. And she played the original version. We got Final Fantasy Chronicles, that had that Final Fantasy IV and Chrono Trigger on the PlayStation, and then there was that DS port years later as well too. But we've bought every version, as it's come out, and she's gone through and like played through and all that stuff. Every version as they've come out as well too. So being able to see her just like love that game as much as she has, it's just one of those ones that's always eluded me, but I just of its status. Like, I mean, there's just really no kind of fighting back against the power that is Chrono Trigger.
Yeah, this is the pick. So I wanted to leave. So I know somebody was gonna pick this, so I'm just like, but it's amazing game. It's one of those games that, I mean, I'll be frank. Me and my friend Tim Rogers from Action Button, we talk about this game a lot, and we do have some hiccups with like its battle system and just like the positioning of battles. But that being said, it's everything else. Like that's a complete package. There's very few things like within like video games that have so much like in the whole. I mean, you're talking about you have the mixture of like the quirkiness and hip style of Sakaguchi via like Final Fantasy. You have like the streamlined, very, very like get to like the essence of game design that comes from somebody like Yuji Horii from Dragon Quest. The character designs and the worlds, just everything. It's amazing. It's probably Akira Toriyama's like greatest work, which is saying a lot, you know. And the music is phenomenal as well. I mean, I still think of a lot of those tracks just, like play ad infinitum, like in my mind, like without, and it's not one of those like annoying, like, oh, why is that song stuck in my head? It's like, yeah, like, you know, it's fantastic and great pick, and it deserves all the picks. Maybe we should just pick this game again and again and again and again. Yeah, I can't wait for. I mean, it's gonna be. I know that. I'm gonna give some spoilers here. Probably not gonna get in trouble about this, but I have like I have some intel that Square Enix is working on this, and then they're going to, and they're going to push for it even more after the success of Dragon Quest III HD 2D remake, which was, according, I think, like their only quote unquote profitable game that actually like met or exceeded like sales expectations. So yeah, I'm very excited. Everybody should play this game.
Yeah, I will be on board with that. Whatever newness comes from it, I'll be on board there. I'm also going to take a big one off the table. I already mentioned it. I just have to, and we really don't even have to talk about it much because it is what it is. But Final Fantasy VII, the original PlayStation version, it just means a lot to me from just a nostalgia, like in a personal bias. It was my first one, like I said, so I'm picking it for that reason. I am a huge fan of like the pixel art and like the classic looks of RPGs, but like you mentioned earlier, Aidan, like having those pre-rendered like backgrounds, I think just like, you know, made you just really like wonder and imagine yourself being in this world and everything. And like a good RPG, like being able to tell a story through like the NPCs of a town you uncover and like find more, like exploring like an open world. I mean, it's not really like an open world. It is pretty linear about how it guides you through the story. But like when you decide to wander and like talk to an NPC and like discover something else, like you're rewarded with like more information and more just kind of like detail about this world, about this place. You know, the materia system was the new gimmick for them there, and you know, it just played on like the job system they already had established, like in previous games as well, just iterating on itself, having something kind of new but still kind of feeling familiar. It is just a great game. Like it you know, it's not everyone's favorite. You know, it's definitely I could confidently say it's overrated as far as like, you know, people will always have it as like, you know, the number one or the best or whatever. Like I genuinely feel that way, but I also completely understand that it's biased that I feel that way because it being my first one. So I can completely understand somebody telling me, you know, 6 or 9 or, you know, whatever like is like their favorite, because it's all like person, place, and moments and everything. This one just happens to be mine. So yeah, I'm not going to waste some of our valuable time on talking about this more, but if you guys have anything to say about 7, yeah, that's my first pick.
I think 7's just so notable for what it did for console RPGs in the West and the way it just blew the lid off popularity for the genre in a way that, you know, Nintendo had been trying for 2 console generations to like make that happen in the West, giving away free copies of Dragon Warrior with, you know, Nintendo Power. And, you know, it really took something that I think had a company like Square just making a game for a Japanese audience, but just going kind of full bore on these themes that resonated in the West. And that coupled with, you know, the pre-rendered backgrounds, the cinematic storytelling and visual storytelling, just being such a like lightning on a bottle moment for RPGs, and the way that, you know, just revolutionized what we expected of the genre over here in North America.
Yeah, it's one of those games that you don't, even if you haven't played it, you know about it, and it's just such a such a colossus when it comes to just its influence on popular culture. It's so salient now too. Like that story, it's so salient. Like as years go on, it's one of those games that I constantly think of, like its narrative. You know, like a mega corporation destroying the planet, and the good guys are initially doing things that would otherwise be perceived as like the bad guys, right? So it's like it's edgy in that way, and it really follows like some pretty interesting themes. I mean, building up on like Final Fantasy VI and everything. It's fantastic. I'll just add something really quick about this, which is that it's also as a game, as a text, right? If you're gonna read it, like criticize it, it's really interesting to see how one of the most expensive games ever made refold, right? Like the original, then the currently new games, right? Which video games are such a environmentally destructive thing to make. It's a game about the environment. It's a very salient and very like real critique of the way that we exploit like the environment. So it has a lot of layers that one can look into just beyond like the game itself. But yes, so great pick.
Yeah, handing it off the board. My next ones, I promise, will be more personal and interesting. That one just is, it is what it is. So Luis, we'll snake back to you. Let's bat second on our order here. And what do you got for your number 2?
Yeah, probably one of the most significant games to be released ever, definitely in the past 2 decades, Dark Souls. How Souls-like, you hear that so many times. So like Dark Souls, it's like it's almost like we're living like in hell, like so many times, like people like say that. It definitely made a huge impression on me. I actually did not play this when it came out. I was doing completely different work than what I'm doing now, like, being like a games critic. So I was living in a place I didn't have like a lot of access to the modern tech, yet alone a PlayStation 3. But I came to it much later, and years later, I was like, holy shit, like, wait, are we allowed to curse here? Sorry if I...
Yeah.
But it's like,
no, that's totally fine.
I was like, man. Yeah, thank you. I was just completely struck by like its design. I've been a big fan of FromSoft stuff. And like I said, I'm a generic card slinger, so stuff like as obscure as like their Lost Kingdoms games for like the GameCube, even stuff like their early PlayStation stuff. But this one, it had that FromSoft, that weird, like, it's not necessarily the most polished game, but its world building and a lot of the lore behind it is just so strong and so evocative as you play the game. And then this really punishing style of like game, which I think it gets overstated. I don't think Dark Souls games, Souls-likes, are as difficult as they actually are. Initially they are, but it's still like an RPG. It still has like very much like that Dragon Quest DNA, where like if you level up enough, you can essentially just like whack anything on there, and but it's one of the masterpieces, I think, of games, and it's definitely showed that it came out during a time where a lot of Western developers and critics in particular were really talking a lot of shit about like Japanese like developed games, unfairly so, but the ones that paid attention and saw this, it's like, oh wow, it's this. Not only is this great, this might be the future, and look at it now. Like, you can't escape it.
Yeah, I don't have much to add, but when a game spawns its own like subgenre of imitators, and Souls-like, its name inspires an entire like subset of games for generations. You must have done something well. So that's a solid pick for sure. Aidan, do you have anything to add? If not, you can share your number 2. I know we
I've
gave
never
ourselves
actually-
a time limit on here,
Yeah.
and so we're going to stare down
gotta
this clock here.
Move a little quicker.
Yeah.
I've never actually played Dark Souls specifically, but I'm a big fan of Elden Ring, big fan of Demon Souls as well. And I think that its influence over like what's come after from Demon Souls onward is kind of undeniable. And then the big, enormous like pop culture phenomenon of Elden Ring shows how much potential that series has. And I hope it goes back to titles like Dark Souls for inspiration instead of continuing to sort of like avalanche down to, you know, to bigger, faster, harder, more ridiculous bosses. But in any case, I diverge. My number 2 choice on this list today is going to be Lunar, Silver Star Story Complete, which is getting a remake in a few months and is also just a very special game for me for a lot of reasons that have to do with what came out around the same time as, specifically for me, the PlayStation remake of Lunar, Silver Star Story. It came out on PlayStation, and it came out around, you know, like post Final Fantasy VII. So as we were sort of seeing an explosion of Japanese RPGs that were leaning into like Final Fantasy VII had its like gritty, like cyberpunk aesthetic, and it's like really kind of, you know, like hard-nosed environmental themes, like anti-capitalist themes, which resonated with me so much as a teenager. But I also really missed what I like to think of as like just the Saturday morning cartoon style of Japanese RPG or console RPG, and Lunar does that just better than any other game at the time. It's effervescent and it's bubbly and it's fun, and the characters just stuck with me. It has a small cast. The world is bright. The voice acting and the anime cutscenes just hit in a way that few games have for me at that time, and I just really sunk into it. And another close friend of mine was playing through it at the same time. I would bring my TV over to his house with my PlayStation. We'd set up back to back and just play this game for hours, and it was the perfect amalgamation of just like fun storytelling that seemed, you know, consequential and serious without actually feeling super threatening at a time when, you know, we're getting stuff like Xenogears and Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy Tactics, which I loved for other reasons. Lunar was just the flip side of that coin, and it's always remained a really strong favorite of mine. I think it has some issues, especially the Western version. Working Designs liked to tweak their games a lot, and Lunar's, some people have a lot of trouble with the scripts, and the Western script doesn't hold up very well. For me personally, the way that they tweaked the difficulty to make it a lot grindier and more difficult than the Japanese release is sort of like runs counter to the game's overall sort of like underlying kindness and softness. The game itself presents itself as like, you know, a Saturday morning cartoon, but then it's also one of the like grindiest RPGs on the console. You're like, you know, going through dungeons is just like a war of attrition to just get as far as you can and then retreat, and then stock back up on healing items, and then go through the dungeon again, try to retreat, you know, and then you kind of make your way slowly through there, and it just doesn't really jive with the overall experience. But that was something I was willing to look past. And now there are ways to play the PlayStation version with the English script and the Japanese difficulty. And I think, you know, you can just get the best of both worlds at this point.
Yeah, what's interesting about that, though, is the game originally being like a Sega CD title, like in the history of the genre, it is, you know, it's earlier, much earlier than games like Final Fantasy VII or VIII or Xenogears and things like that. But its re-emergence came as like a breath of fresh air, like you said, like when things started to get moody, heavier, like way too big for their britches and everything. Like, it's interesting that it was only it's just you know, introduction to the world is that, you know, is when I think got its like bigger like wind in its sails and everything, even though it had already had a previous life. But just a curious, interesting timing, the way that it kind of came out, it like worked out for itself and was able to double dip, but, you know, feel even, you know, refreshed again. Luis, do you have any thing to share about Lunar? If not, I'll pick my third for y'all.
Yeah, no, I'll just say that I'm very excited that, with re-releases, remaster of the, it's a long time coming, very excited, and a lot more people are going to be able to play these games.
Yeah, and it's coming up soon. My number two, I'm not gonna go. I think there was an obvious one I think I would have picked for me, but I'll still keep it interesting and personal. Suikoden I, the original. I'm not gonna pick 2. I know a lot of folks probably think 2's the best one, and it might be the best one. But I think that just finding that game for $20 on some random store, when I was a kid, it was a post Final Fantasy VII world for me, so I was looking for more RPG fixes. Just looked at the ridiculous cover art that we got in North America for it, and reading the back of the case, and it just sounded kind of convoluted and political and everything. I'm like, this is probably everything I want in a game, so let's just give this a shot. And I remember the hook was set in. I played the first couple hours or so and felt like a very traditional RPG. But one morning before school, I would get up really early to give myself an hour of playtime or something before I had to go to school. And that's when I was in the headquarters and didn't realize it, and fought and beat that little undead dragon boss that you have to kill to get your headquarters. And all I can think about at school that whole day was wait a minute, this is where all my people are meeting. I want to go find a bunch of these people. I wonder how many people are in the world that can come back and join my headquarters. And having this cast of 108 characters that are all unifying to help the conflict that is in this game. And it's a real heavy political story and everything. So even though it has this kind of pixelated and dated kind of visual style to it, it was just as meaty and weighted as Final Fantasy VII was to me. But I just loved the charm of it. I loved that I could pick my roster of characters, out of the numerous number of playable characters you can have in your party. I could meet somebody who used an entirely different cast because there was just that many kind of special characters to it. The battle system was highly fast paced. You can load in, start fighting, and finish a battle very quickly in comparison to other games in the genre of that time. And that is a big thing. I think young Darren learned that then, but the quicker you can get in and out of combat means that either I can invest more time grinding if I need to break the game, or I can get back into the story I want. And yeah, that game just had a great balance: tone, setting, originality, cast of characters, pacing. That original one really set the stage for me for knowing that I didn't need to explore this new PlayStation powered 3D world evolving the genre, that I could just enjoy what the genre even was, just prior to those moments, and still find something solid to love. So that is why Suikoden will be my second pick.
That's a fabulous pick. I'm playing the first Suikoden right now, and I just beat the zombie dragon to get my home base earlier today, and it's such a monumental moment when you realize that this game that's sort of been about this the storyline's kind of like a boulder rolling down a mountain, right? You're running, you're on the run from the Empire, and you're just trying to kind of get away, and then you go through this opportunity where you get this castle, and then all of a sudden the structure of the game changes, and the scope of what you'll be doing as sort of a hero in an RPG changes to something that I had never experienced before, back in the mid-90s when the game came out. And it's still just such a compelling way of designing an RPG where you're building a party, but your party isn't just, a small number of people with skills. It's a huge diverse pool of people from all walks of life, and I would love to see more of that, not just in not just from Suikoden. The remaster is coming out soon, which I'm excited for. I think we're all excited for, but I want to see more of that. Let's see, we had Aidan Chronicle, which was a spiritual successor, but like, let's see more Suikoden. Let's see more people playing with the way that casts of characters, large casts, can become their own character, as a whole.
Yeah. I think also one thing that is important to me, I think in that moment was it wouldn't be much longer after that I started getting into like punk music and everything. And I think the idea of like this liberation army and like standing up even within like it's like, his own family as the main hero. And there was like this really like punk rock kind of like essence to it. I mean, maybe I am just kind of transplanting that onto there myself or whatever, but I think that web was caught in me, like knowing that like this cast of characters was building a community to stand up for what they thought was right, that was being inherited. If they kind of follow with what their legacy would have been, would have been something kind of evil, and they wanted to kind of carve their own path and everything. So it was always just an interesting time. I think just being that age and everything, and that's why I have a love and nostalgia for it.
Late 90s RPGs like radicalized me for sure. Like, more so than like anything else. Some people have Ursula K. Le Guin, or Octavia Butler, and I have Japanese RPGs on the PlayStation for sure.
There's a lot to love in that game. I'll just add something similar to when I said about Lunar, which is, it's coming out soon. A lot of people are going to get to play it for the first time. It looks like it's going to be a pretty good job by Konami. I know they're hit or miss when it comes to like the remasters. This one looks like it's going to, it's definitely gonna add some stuff and add some quality of life improvements. Like, great game. I'll just roll with my third pick, right?
Yeah,
so,
let's do it.
Yeah, and I'll just this is an easy choice because it's a game named after a god, so it's Hades. It's Super Giant Games, just incredible procedural storytelling game. I mean, it plays. It plays like a roguelike, but the way that the story is essentially drip fed to you like through like every run. It's really captivating. The voice acting is some of the best I've ever heard, and its gameplay, its loop is one of the most satisfying and like addictive. It's a true achievement, and it's the only roguelike that I've ever liked, really, that I'm like, oh, I like this game. I can't say that about other games like that. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's a cool pick. That's it's got all the right like balance of everything. Cool visuals, like it makes you feel like really good at the game when you're in like a really good groove and a really good run. I do like that it gets, by design, the way it like kind of mixes itself up, and you have like these fun, every run can feel different and everything, but then the way that like, the RPG brain of mine, like the long form story that's being told, that all of those loops and all that progress, is still like adding more of that content. It isn't just resetting everything from moment one, which is really cool. That game, got me hooked really early on, and I've been kind of looking for other games that kind of scratch that same itch, and I will say, I've been playing it obsessively these last couple of days, but Warriors Abyss is a very, very, very poor man's Hades. If you're looking for more Hades-like games in your life, this mixes the Dynasty Warriors and Samurai Warriors and all of the Warriors games kind of in a roguelike action hack and slash type thing that I am, should not have sank this many hours into it, but those games, can be my jam. And when it wants to try and do a Hades-like, why? I have no idea who asked for it and who, saw this coming. I have no idea, but for $25, you can buy it today and get something similar to that if you're interested. But Aidan, if you have any thoughts on Hades, let us know. And then if not, you could also go with your third pick after.
Yeah, I mean, Hades is one of the best written games of all time. It's the gold standard as far as I'm concerned when it comes to dialogue and character building and narrative through sort of character building. It's phenomenal. Number 3 on my list is going to be a game that I actually just played for the first time or completed for the first time that managed to make its way onto my, if not my top 10 list, like possibly my top 5 of all time list, and that is Vagrant Story. late PlayStation RPG that is, looks like a real-time action RPG. It was sort of marketed against Metal Gear Solid, but it's really like a real-time with pause strategy game masquerading as a real-time action game. It's bizarre. It's very strange, but it has incredible writing and an incredible localization. I think that's probably the thing it's most known for, is its localization by Alexander O. Smith, who went far above and beyond what I think not only could we expect of localizations in the year 2000, but like even by today's standards, it's above and beyond what we kind of go and expect from localizations. It gives the game so much flavor and depth. That's really kind of stuck with me, and lifts the great story that Yasumi Matsuno, who created the game in Japanese and wrote the game in Japanese, what he created, Alex O. Smith sort of elevates to another level. It's also known for being just very hard, which I think is a bit of an illusion. It has very complex game systems that it does not explain very well. But once I took the time to go look at, a handful of guides, specifically on crafting and how combat works, I found the game, kind of stodgy and needed a lot of quality of life improvements, but quite approachable, quite understandable, and like by the end of the game it was very easy. It has sort of an inverse difficulty curve, so I would always bounce off the first 45 minutes or so, but once I committed to it, learned the systems, and I was cruising through the game, like utilizing all of the weapon systems, like the combo system, and just feeling like you play a special agent. You feel like a special agent in this fantasy world, and it just snared me in a way that like I haven't been taken in by a PlayStation game since the year 2000. It was like Chrono Cross was probably the last time I was so obsessed with playing a PlayStation game, and I sank into it and played 40 hours and just could not put it down in January, and I was so glad that I had that chance to play it, and now it's one of my favorite games of all time.
I know I saw the online playthrough like unfold. It was I think one of your CRT photos on Blue Sky, and then it was like, oh, there's another one. Like, oh, he's just playing this now. Oh, and then you mentioned that, like, yeah, you know what, I'm sticking with this one and can keep playing. And
yeah.
Brian Rigsby from Retro Game Books, he also just shortly before you also had just started playing that and posting a thread on that, and same thing, like it hooked him, and just seeing his like comments and everything on it, like it is such a unique game. I think if it wasn't like marketed or like released when it was, like obviously it was late cycle, and I think the way it looked, people assumed it was something different, or they just, because they assumed that that's what it was, maybe they just skipped it outright. But like, in a different spin of events, like maybe it could be like a much more discussed game than it kind of is, I feel. Of beautiful visuals though. I love the look of that game.
Yeah, it's still remarkable what they managed to accomplish. And the fact that it was like Square's first 3D, like fully 3D game. So they had done 3D backgrounds with sprite characters or pre-rendered backgrounds with 3D characters, but this was the first time in this sort of setting that they were really going deep on 3D characters in 3D environments. And so like the character models in that have fewer polygons than Final Fantasy VIII's characters. But it just looks, because they had such a strong experience with texture design at that point, they were able to just make these technical compromises into strengths in the game. And it just like playing through the whole thing, I was just blown away that this was a PlayStation game, that it's like pretty small. Like the file size is quite small. A lot of the RPGs at the time were bragging about how many discs they were, and there was Vagrant Story on one CD, and you download it now on PSN, and it's pretty small, because they were just so clever with the way that they designed the graphics, the way that they implemented the storytelling and the visual storytelling, with tools that embraced the limitations rather than trying to fight against them.
Mm-hmm. Luis, did you have anything to share? If not, I'll go on to my three.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add, it's one of the most beautiful games. This and Chrono Cross, I think, are the prettiest games on the PlayStation. Well, Ridge Racer, some of the Ridge Racer games as well. But yeah, definitely gorgeous. And some of the great costumes on characters, like the outfits are so ridiculous.
Yeah, the Ace Combat 3 is another pretty PS1 game. I think if we're just going to talk about awesome visuals on hardware that it shouldn't be done on, that's another highlight. I'll share my three. My number 3 is continuing the train of thought that young Darren had in a fast battle system, in a game that allows you to control its pace. So if you want to like dive into its story, you can focus on that. If you want to dive into like that grindy, like let me get stronger, let me find the hidden items, let me make sure my characters are the best they can be, you can spend time doing that. If you want to just kind of enjoy the world and kind of experience, wandering for some secrets, just like Suikoden, you can do all that in this game. But Octopath Traveler 2, for sure, like it took everything, like that's when that was released and I got to finally play it, like I had already known that like that a game that allows you to kind of control and dictate its pace is like that style game that I always want to play and I always want to get behind. And it has just an amazing battle system that is fast and fluid, like you're menuing in your choices, like there's no like downtime between it, but there's still like flashy and great visuals and attacks and everything. You're in and out of combat super fast so that you can enjoy that, what they're calling the HD 2D world of it all, like the super beautiful pixelated like sprites all for the characters and the environments that are around, but all set in like a 3D world. With like obvious like ridiculous like bokeh like depth of field effects and like lighting effects and time of day and things that cast shadows and things that shouldn't happen with pixel art, but when they mix together for some reason it's like chocolate and peanut butter for me, and I will like not stop until I'm in a diabetic coma. I want more of this. I want all of this. I was excited to have the opportunity to be locked in my console of choice with the PlayStation. I missed the first one for quite a while, but like knowing that I can like go and play that, like I've now like talked myself out of playing it just in case I want it there for a rainy day. But then I also don't want it to turn into a Chrono Cross situation for me where I've just never played it because I'm waiting on that right moment. And that right moment, I should just do it. But it's just got all the right balance, and I think that the way it breaks up its 8 characters in chapters, I think if somebody who's like lapsed on the genre, maybe you grew up with it and kind of walked away from it and are intimidated by the idea of playing like a 70-hour game or something like that, like I don't blame you. But the way this game is structured, having the 8 characters stories, like you can play it kind of like in chunks and chapter by chapter and get to like a good like resting point in this game by design and not feel so intimidated by it. And after a few hours you'll realize it's got its hooks in you, and it's safe to play these games again, and it's safe to go in those waters again and to be obsessed and be a fan of it. But Octopath Traveler 2 is my number 3, and I want more of it.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the most underrated games, I think. I think 2023 had a lot of great games, and this one, to me, was the standout that fell like under like the radar. It's one of the most accomplished like games, like what it tries to do. It's almost like I mean, this kind of sound kind of blasphemous, but it's like a more fully realized version of Dragon Quest IV, essentially. Like in a modern day era, you have like these split stories, but instead of like all the stories just leading you to everybody coming together at the end, where really it's like the actual game, not the tutorial. This one essentially throws that out, and it's like, no, you can choose between these characters and eventually, come together. It's great. I think the first one I wasn't too keen on, and this one just completely blew me away.
What's interesting too,
I agree that.
Oh, sorry. The one thing to say real quick. I did something in this game that I've never done in a previous RPG, and that's like elixirs, things that fully restore your health and magic points. Like every game before this, I'm always like, hey, just in case I need this, just in case I need it for the last boss or something, just in case those stay in my inventory, I roll credits and they're unused entirely. This is a game I was unafraid to use them. Well, I technically used them on like the secret final boss and everything, but like I had no problem. I was like, you know what? I'm all in it. Like this is the final battle. Let's start using these things. And I felt so good using items that I would typically just let rot in digital like dungeons because I would just be too afraid to like use them one time and be done with it. But sorry, go ahead, Aidan.
Oh, I was just gonna echo the fact that I found that Octopath Traveler 2 was just such a big leap over Octopath Traveler, and I was really excited for the original one when it came out. I bought a Switch to play it. I put like 40 hours into it and sort of faded off of it because I felt like there wasn't any one major thing wrong with it, but there were just so many little bits of friction along the way, or things, ideas that weren't just fully realized in a way that I found satisfying, that the experience of actually playing it just didn't feel complete to me. Whereas Octopath Traveler 2, one of the things that I just really liked about it was it took the first game and it refined ideas. It took the flaws and you know, buffed them out. And it didn't try to reinvent the wheel. It didn't try to become something new. It didn't try to, like, you know, forge its own identity. It just took the first game and made a better, improved version of it that just feels like such a delight to play. The world's expansive. The stories are better. The balance of the characters is more interesting. The job system is better realized. Just everything about it is just the first game, but better. And that, to me, is a hallmark of a lot of the great like RPG sequels that I can think of. Stuff like, you know, Darren, you brought up Suikoden earlier, and Suikoden 2 is exactly in that wheelhouse where it's just Suikoden but better in every way. You know, and Lunar and then Eternal Blue, its sequel, it's kind of like, you know, it's just Lunar but better and bigger. And, you know, I think that that is something that I would like to see more often in RPG sequels, like not throwing everything out. I think there's this idea with like Final Fantasy that everything needs to be sort of thrown out, and you got to start over, and every game in a series has to have its own sort of unique identifier. And sometimes it's like, no, just like take something that was pretty good and make it better and run that back, because that can be really compelling. And Octopath Traveler 2 to me is like the prime example of that.
Yeah. Right. All right, Luis, we've got our last two picks here. So do you want to kick us off with the fourth round of choices?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna make the hard decision here. It's gonna be a Dragon Quest game. Any given day, it can be any of them. But you know, since it's today, I'm gonna say Dragon Quest VIII, which I think it's in many ways the best encapsulation of the feeling of what Dragon Quest is as a series. It's definitely one where you get the whimsy, you get like the fairy tale like structure, the arcs, the storytelling arcs, as you might see like in a show and manga, are very much like done in this game in a way that I find the most satisfying. It's a gorgeous game on the PlayStation 2. The re-release on the 3DS, you know, doesn't have like the same like graphical fidelity, but it adds some, you know, it has some gameplay improvements. And it's a game that, I mean, I bought a 3DS for. I mean, you know, I bought a system for like a re-release of a of a game. You know, that's something that I've never really done. And what Dragon Quest, I think it's my favorite video game series. It's one of the most important video game series out there. I think it's more important than even a lot of people think about it. And it's a series that really grows with the player more than any other series, in my opinion, because it's one where its accessibility and what it is apparent from the very beginning, meaning that it's not one where, you know, sometimes you might play a game and you liked it as a child, but then you become an adult and you go back to it, it's like, oh, this is like nonsense. I can't believe I like this for whatever reason. Dragon Quest is never like that because it's very transparent of what it's trying to do. So the way that those games do grow it's more of like they grow as a part of you, as like these characters and like the narratives. There's no fluff in them. 8 has an amazing story. It's almost like it's a feel good game. I mean, it gets dark. It gets dark like a lot of these games do, but it's one where I'm thinking about it a lot now, just because of just the current like state of things now, and I just keep thinking of not necessarily a simpler time and nostalgia, because I think that can be, in a lot of ways, that can be a bad thing. But it is good to have like a place, like a safe place where one could think and escape for a little bit, so then one can go back out, right, and like do what one needs to do. And that's what Dragon Quest is, and 8 specifically, I think, really gets to that. And also, yeah. I mean, it has the greatest character of all time in there, but Yengiz, it's just Yengiz. Amazing. Underpants dance every day. I get up in the morning and I do the underpants dance to my wife's chagrin.
That's great. Dragon Quest is always a series that like I've respected from afar. I think 8 was the first time I ever really like gave it a legitimate shot and everything, but of course, like the next new shiny thing that came out like took my attention, and I had to like move on from it. But having recently last year finishing that Dragon Quest III HD 2D remake, again, that's all it takes, I guess, for me to enjoy a game. Loved that game to death. I am on board with the what's the name? The Erdrick, the name you get after you finish it and everything. Yeah, I'm on board with that saga. Like, I want to see like the 1 and 2 come next, and I've heard amazing things, and even as you shared, like with Dragon Quest IV having like similarities with the way its like story structure is to Octopath. Like, it's a series I'm excited to spend more time and like dive into for sure as well. So that's a really cool choice. I'm glad a Dragon Quest game is off the board. Aidan, you've got your 4th pick on the clock. Not the clock.
Yeah, so pick number 4 for me is going to be sort of a not a deep cut, but not like a kind of top flight game that I see talked about a lot. It's Illusion of Gaia on the Super NES. It's the middle portion of like the Soul Blazer trilogy from Enix and Quintet. And it just, every time, it was a game that we spent a lot of time playing in high school. It sort of has an action RPG-ish element to it. You're, exploring dungeons, you're doing real-time combat. The character you play is Will, who's a kind of average kid. He uses the flute as a weapon. It's strange. But he can turn into this knight named Freedan, which is, a big, tall knight with a sword, and then this sort of dark, magical knight as well, to kind of create new combat opportunities and puzzle solving. But the thing that really sticks out to me about Illusion of Gaia, even above and beyond like Soul Blazer or its sequel Terranigma, which is also really great, is it has this like undertone of melancholy that I've just never seen in any other game since, at the time, or ever. There's just a sadness to the world, to the story, to the events that happen along the way. There's, tragedy. There's, just this idea that the world is hard and sad, but you need to keep pushing because, the answers you need and you seek might be out there somewhere. And that's something that I just don't see in games very often. And even when there are sort of hopeful moments, they sort of get taken away and swept away from you in ways that surprise you and leave you feeling just a little sad, which I think is a remarkable thing for a early gen 16-bit, action RPG with a very bad localization. Like, the translation is awful, but it still manages through its music, through its visuals to convey this sense of sadness that just has stuck with me since I played it in 1994 or whenever it came out.
Yeah, I've never actually played it. I don't have any history with it. It's something I would like to look into.
You definitely...
I was just going to say, it's set in the real world, which is also interesting. So you go to the Nazca Plains, you go to Angkor Wat, you go to the Great Wall of China. But there's also this like undercurrent of magic that feels really, kind of haunting and unique, which helps it stand out.
Yeah, I was going to say, you should definitely play it. I love this game. I played it on a bootleg copy with the name of with the PAL release name, which is like Illusion of Time, and it's I definitely got that sense of like that melancholy, and it was at a time too where I hadn't have that much experience with action RPGs, so it really made an impression on me on there. I haven't played Trailblazer, but I have played Terranigma, and I do enjoy this more than Terranigma. I think Terranigma is a little bit more, the sadness and melancholy kind of like shove it down your throat a little bit like too much, where for Illusion of Gaia it feels like a lot more natural and actually like embedded in the world much, and has like a really neat pretty important side quest, which is collecting the red orbs. I forget the name of the red gems or orbs. And that was like a lot of fun. For a game like its look, right, like the graphics and everything, it kind of takes you back a bit when you see some of the themes like as they're presented in the game. Great pick.
There's a new fan translation that just came out recently, which I played about half an hour of, and it seems really good because the underlying story there is pretty decent. It was the localization that let that down, and so I'd really like to go and give the fan translation like a full playthrough, because I think that could just add on top of what already exists for me with Illusion of Gaia and that kind of unique feeling of melancholy.
Fun. I'm struggling over my fourth pick. I'm going to say I want there to be like variety. Like I'm giving myself like these false like prerequisites to like my choices. I'm just gonna go with my gut. I'm gonna say Persona 5 Royale. Cheat with that re-release and Game of the Year edition or whatever. That classic Persona thing they do where they give you more content and have you buy the game a second time. This was in my comeback moment as well. Again, lapsed from the genre for a couple of years just because I felt like I could not invest the time necessary in order to play a game, because there's new games every couple of weeks and I have to buy them all and they have to sit on my shelf unplayed and everything. But this was the first year where I really like stuck to I'm not buying a game until I beat the first or the one that I have now. Commit to it as long as you want to. You don't have to beat it, all the way, but like just play it so that you know that you're done with it and you enjoyed whatever it was that you were experiencing from it. And I rolled credits after about 130 hours on that game, and it was just like, I guess a game for the moment for me. Just like knowing that I could go back and go into the genre and everything, and then also having such a fondness for obviously like the medieval fantasy like vibe you get from like so many like RPG like hits from just over the entire like history of the genre. Like having like the Persona series show up and be like a spin-off of its own series from Japan, and take place like in modern high school settings with like kids and all that stuff. Like again, knowing that like I always felt like kind of a little bit of like the outcasty kind of kept to himself kind of shy kid. I got along with folks and everything, but like it just like I definitely was like a little bit more sensitive and in touch with my surroundings, and like again finding like punk music, and you create this isolation for yourself as much as you feel like you're creating a community for yourself by finding that stuff. But I just love the characterization and like the concept of that storyline, having like real world setting of it all, and then having like just this bizarre like over the top like anime influenced like style to it, like the menus and UIs and like all of like the characterizations and all that stuff are just cool. Like it just looks rad, and it looks rad in motion and everything. And it's another game that rewards you for your investment. Like the more you're grinding it out and the more you're kind of playing through it, you're rewarded with like mechanics like into like the 50s and 60s of hours of playing it that like help you again like control the pacing of the game to your choice and to your choosing. And grinding repetitive like lower level enemies, like you end up being able to get a shortcut later on in the game that helps you kind of avoid some of those things. And so so many tools and systems, mechanics in it, and it's not overdone in a giant world. I mean, you're realistically like transporting yourself from like a couple like small locations with key character interactions that like lead you into the mechanics that then advance the story into like a dungeon. And there's really not like a massive world to it, but it doesn't like, unless you stop to really like pay attention and think about it, it never makes you feel that way. There's still like a large sense of exploration. Like I feel like I was younger and I would fault Final Fantasy 13 for being like that hallway simulator. And, if somebody really wanted to argue about that Persona formula, like they make the same argument almost with it, because there's not like this massive like kind of world to it. It's just the way they have it designed, the way they give you agency in certain moments, the way they still introduce like time locked or like, select secret areas to kind of like explore and find that are off the beaten path, but still guide you through it all. Like, it is just an interesting design, and I just love the battle system as far as, again, the pacing and speed of it all. Like you're able to get in and get out quickly, but like the press turn system of exploiting like character weaknesses and things like that is just a kind of a different take on the standard just turn-based system. Like you're more maximizing like turn order and trying to make sure you're making the right move, hoping maybe get a little bit lucky with a certain critical hit or so, but it's just kind of fun to kind of play with that balance and think about battles in a different way. But everything that did was just at the right time for me. It was cool. It's a different setting, a non-traditional setting for the genre, and it was just fun, top to bottom, to kind of play it. It didn't even feel like it was 130 hours. I could play like another 10.
I'm a big Persona 3 and 4 fan. 5 did feel like it was 130 hours to me, but I didn't play Royal. And I think that smoothed over a lot of the issues that I ended up having with 5, which just, to me, kind of, I love the world, I love the urban setting, I love the cast a lot. But some of the stuff you talked about with like dungeon design kind of outstayed its welcome a little bit more for me. And so it's one I've always sort of had a conflicted relationship with. Like I look back fondly at very specific moments of time with Persona 5 that I really admire and really look back on. I love the combat system. It's such a refinement of what came before and is one of the best, I think, in RPGs. And so I think back on that stuff so fondly, and developing your personas and, kitting out your team and all of that stuff. And it was just some of the stuff around it where I felt like it just filled its borders a little bit too much for me. But
yeah, Luis, if you have something to share. If not, you can kickstart our final pick. I know my idea for the time limit went out the window, so look, we're at the end here though. Last round of our choices for our list.
I'll make it quick. I think Persona 5's overrated. It looks great though, and the soundtrack's awesome.
This is the first dissenting opinions here, but that's okay. That's what we're here for.
Shin Megami Tensei 5 is a better experience in my opinion. But now I'm gonna my final pick. It's an easy one. Mother 3. It's unfortunately not available officially in English. But the good folks at Starman.net. Tomato and friends, they really did a fantastic job with the localization. This is a game that was the first game that I've played where the writing stood up to be when it comes to like a great like modernist like novel. It's quirky, it's charming, it's devastating. Aidan talked earlier about, Final Fantasy VII's like critique of capitalism. Mother 3 has it as well, and I think it really does it in a way that's less, for lack of better words, like hypocritical, right? It's more piercing. it's incredible score. It's odd, right? Because it's one of these games where when you look at it at face value, like the entire package, you're like, yeah, it's fine. But when you're playing it and all these different things, what comes out of it is just something that is truly miraculous. And you can see it by like the passion that the fan base has, like, going out and like translating the game and all this stuff. There's even like the Earthbound like documentary that came out like last year, which is a pretty interesting watch. If I had to choose just like a handful of like video games that I would like save, right? Like humanity's about to be like extinct. This is one of them.
High praise.
It's a fabulous game for all the reasons that you just mentioned. Its critique of capitalism is very fascinating. And then you kind of take a step back and say, oh, wait, I'm playing this on a Game Boy, like a Game Boy Advance. The fact that they have this sort of bold experience that's unlike anything else. It's not even really like Mother 2 or Earthbound. Like, it kind of looks similar, but you play them side by side and you're like, these are their own very unique experiences that want to say something different from one another. And the fact that you're playing it on a Game Boy Advance is just wild. It's something that I think everybody should experience, Mother 3, and see what sort of video games as a medium have to offer in terms of like narrative impact and the way that they can reach for so much with story and themes, even within the really narrow confines of the technology available on the Game Boy Advance.
Cool. Well, do you want to give us your fifth pick then there, Aidan, your final one?
My fifth and final pick. So I could have, I could go so many different ways. Suikoden II would have made my list, but Darren had Suikoden 1, so I want to avoid saying that, because a lot of what would be said about Suikoden 1 is said about Suikoden 2. Same for Dragon Quest V, probably would have made my list, but we've already done Dragon Quest 8. So I'm going to go with something that's the kickoff for another series that has disappeared, but I think holds a special place in RPGs as a sort of transitional series from the 16-bit era forward, and that's the first Grandia game, which is built from the ashes of the Lunar series. So I did pick Lunar earlier, and that remains a really important series to me. What remained of a third Lunar game ended up making its way into Grandia, which then had a decently successful series with sequels that I think were interesting more than they were good necessarily. But what it does better than anything else, like I talked a lot about Melancholy with Illusion of Gaia, but I think Grandia, the word that comes to mind for me, is just adventure. And it just takes that idea of people going on an adventure and being caught up in something bigger than them, but being active participants in the story and the conflict and pursuing adventure instead of responding to adventure coming from them, is something that I just really enjoy in all types of stories. And to see it in video games where you as a player are that active participant works really well with Grandia. It has such a memorable cast. The original game has like hilariously tacky, cheesy voice acting, which I love dearly. It also has what is, like, in my opinion, the best combat system in console RPGs. We can talk, like Octopath Traveler, which we've talked about, the Persona series. They all have fabulous combat systems. But Grandia, to me, and the way that it mixes like turn-based combat with like a turn order clock, and the way you can manipulate your character's order in that turn order clock, or the enemies, and vice versa, just really hits on all, fires on all cylinders for me. It just really feels satisfying when you start kind of like building together like repeated turns and knocking enemies or bosses off of their attack patterns and capitalizing on their weakness. The first Grandia is pretty easy. That's the only knock against the combat system. I think they could have gone so much more and done so much more with it, but they kind of pulled back on the difficulty. So it doesn't really encourage you or force you to really engage as heavily as it could have. But it is, for my money, the best combat system in the genre. And so that's why I'm going to pick it with my fifth and final pick.
Rad. I wanted to have like something fun, something different on here. I mean, I'm not going to be able to, like, as much as I like Harvest Moon, Friends of Mineral Town, a game that I've spent eons with and all that stuff. I threw that on here. It's not going to, unfortunately, make my top 5 or my, I don't want to say top 5 because just the way we've kind of selected, I think, just kind of creating variety, at least out of the picks. But I want to give that an honorable mention. And same thing for Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, another one that I think is such a great design for folks if they're like new to the genre, can have such a fun and like lighthearted, just entertaining and beautifully like designed game with simple to play and simple to like approach like combat system, but like really fun to master, like with like button timings and all that stuff. But those aren't going to make it. I'm going to go with Skies of Arcadia. I just have to, I mean, something, I did want something lighthearted. I wanted something just kind of that was kind of like, you know, gave a little bit of a different energy from some of the other choices that I picked. And I just think that game, like, it starts out in what a storyline. If you read the script on paper and you kind of looked at that, you may think you were reading like a 16-bit RPG, you know, like script, you know. But then, you know, you realize it's a Dreamcast game, and it was just, you know, Sega just doing what they did on the Dreamcast and just having like a special collection of just genres and mixes and things, and taking some chances and taking some swings at things. It just looked great. It looked like an amazing looking game for its time and everything, and I think brought like a charm and brought like the idea of what some of those worlds may have looked like from the 2D era into 3D. And I think just it worked. I don't think it kind of really missed anything there. Its combat system also, I'm not going to say it's like Final Fantasy X, but when we talked about that earlier about being able to swap in and out your party members to make sure that you weren't punished for not having the right mix, you can change like your elements before an attack and everything. So it encouraged players to like learn this system, and then didn't punish them for not being prepared to participate in the system. And it just had like a really cool pacing, like in a game where you're flying around a sky with so many of these like floating kingdoms and cities and things like that. They still kind of gated you in the early portion in like a kind of a linear way, but every time you advance past that next big plot point, you got something new that lets you traverse a little bit farther and explore a little bit, more. And on top of that, much like my love for the Suikoden, we didn't even talk about that, but that had, beyond just the standard turn-based combat with your 6-person party, there were some strategic battles within it. They weren't too in-depth in that original Suikoden, but Skies of Arcadia has these awesome like ship battles that often preempt like a big boss fight you'll come in contact with afterwards anyway. But it just added some extra variety and extra kind of flavor to it, and just made the game really kind of like more unique and everything too. So I just loved its cast of characters, like Vice's character design and everything. It's just super rad, and oddly seeing them show up in Valkyria Chronicles, a few years later, made me buy that game like many times over for whatever reason, thinking I'm gonna love this game because it's got these characters in it, but never really playing more than the first few hours. Even though it's a fun game, I never committed my time myself the time to enjoy it thoroughly. But Skies of Arcadia, I think especially for the Dreamcast, for it to not have as many a large list of like RPGs available to it if you were a Dreamcast fan, the fact that the short list that it has includes something like Skies of Arcadia, it's well worth seeking out. And if trademark renewals and things like that or anything to be speculated on, not that long ago there was that Hornet's Nest was kicked there, so I'm hoping for some type of re-release, remastered, or reimagined version of this game in the near future myself. But that will be my fifth and final pick, Skies of Arcadia.
Yeah, awesome pick. Both picks. I mean, Grandia, excellent battle system, just so full of whimsy and really like captures that sense of adventure. And same with Skies of Arcadia. I mean, Sega was really was doing really special stuff during that Dreamcast era, and that might be like a perfect like encapsulation of it. It's the blue skies, and those ship battles were truly like amazing. It's one of the few games that actually made me feel like I was like on an adventure.
Yeah,
it really fits in like right there with Grandia when I talk about adventure, like the feeling of being on an adventure. I would put Skies of Arcadia right at the top. It's a fantastic pick.
Rad. Well, we did it. We did the thing. It did go a little longer than we anticipated, and I hope it didn't encroach too much on your personal time and your days there. But thank you so much for having the conversation. Thank you, Luis, for calling us out. And I think this is a fun way for my favorite genre in video games. I think this is a fun way to celebrate, a year of me doing this podcast for sure, having this conversation. So I will share our selected choices when I release the episode. If you're listening to this, check my Blue Sky page at pixelsandpolygons.net, and below you'll see our individual lists. Give it a like. The list that you think is the strongest, give it a like, and we'll arbitrarily pick whose list is more definitive. I do have to at least recognize Luis for picking some fun ones. I feel like I'm the vanilla guy who picked like all like the casual fan RPG choices, while you were rocking Hades and Mother 3 and Chandelar. I mean, Magic the Gathering. So thank you for doing that. And Aidan, obviously you have a large history playing through, so I love that you dug deep and found your personal favorites, but they were quite a mix, and they fit in, not the exact same, choices we kind of maybe would expect. So I got to slot into average guy, and that's okay, but give us a vote there. Anything y'all want to share before we wrap up the episode? Anything you wanted to highlight before we kind of call it a day?
I mean, you can find me on Blue Sky. Aidan is fun. Aidan is .fun is my handle there. I also have a newsletter called Astrolabe that you can find by Googling Astrolabe Aidan Moher. I write a lot about video games and RPGs and video game books and everything in between. And I think if you liked this episode, you'll probably like what you find there.
Yeah, I'll have your links in the show notes, just like you, Luis. I'll include your August points and your links there as well. But anything you'd like to share before we wrap?
You. I mean, same, like find me on Blue Sky. I write all over the internet. You can find my work there. Have some stuff, doing some pretty big projects with the New York Video Games Critics Circle, and some writing coming up for my friends at Unwinnable. So be on the lookout for that.
Rad. All right. Well, thank you too. I appreciate it. I think we'll, we left a lot of games on the table here. So if we were ever to revisit this list, I'll keep this file going, and we can do like a 6 through 10 or something in the future. And maybe we'll kind of go from there. But I appreciate y'all.
I'm already looking at I'm already looking at so many that I feel like I could have just made another like 1 to 5. Yeah. Like there's so many on there. So yeah, we'll do it again sometime for sure. That way I can get some of the Trails in the Sky games on there, so people won't yell at me.
Yeah. Well, we have plenty of ammo.
Yeah, a lot of good games. This is a lot of fun. Thanks for having us, Darren.
Yeah, thanks for calling us out. Thanks for even though it's my podcast, thanks for shouting the idea out and calling us out there. This was fun. Y'all have a great evening and enjoy your night. And y'all, thanks for listening. Catch us next for another year as we round out the start of year 2 here.